Sometimes the greatest tragedies begin quietly. No thunder, no warnings, no screams. Night simply falls, just like hundreds of nights before it. People go to sleep, certain that tomorrow will arrive, that they'll wake up to the same familiar world. But sometimes tomorrow never comes. Springfield, Missouri. Early summer, 1992. A peaceful Midwestern city where life moves slowly, predictably. A place where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors knew each other by name, where violent crime felt like a distant problem belonging to somewhere else. That's why, when 3 women suddenly vanished from the city without leaving a single trace, fear didn't just spread. It shattered the community's sense of safety forever. This is a story that began with laughter, photographs, and dreams for the future, and ended with silence, mystery, and a void that still haunts families, police officers, and an entire city more than 3 decades later. This is a story of 3 women who stepped from the light into the night and were never seen again. Their names were Cheryl Levitt, her daughter Suzanne Susie Streeter, and Susie's best friend, Stacy McCall. A mother, a daughter, and a close friend. They spent that evening full of excitement for the future. It was supposed to be a night they would remember forever, and it was just not in the way anyone expected. June 6, 1992. Kickapoo High School was hosting its graduation ceremony. It was a night filled with joy, hugs, photographs, and endless plans. Graduates talk about college, summer trips, love, and freedom. Nobody was thinking about danger. Nobody imagined that within a few hours, part of that bright future would vanish along with 3 of their own. Susie and Stacy were inseparable. Susie was outgoing, energetic, with a magnetic personality. She loved being the center of attention and dreamed about the life awaiting her after high school. Stacy was calm, responsible, kind, the friend everyone could rely on. Photos from that night still exist. They show 2 young women smiling, radiant, unaware that these images would become the last known photographs taken before everything changed. After the official ceremony, the celebrations began. Groups of friends moved from party to party, laughing, dancing, listening to music, taking pictures with disposable Kodak cameras, making plans the night and the morning after. It was one of those warm summer nights that feel endless, suspended between childhood and adulthood. As midnight approached, Susie and Stacy decided to head to another party at a friend's house. It was crowded, loud, but harmless. There was music, beer, laughter, and talk about heading to White Water, a popular water park in Branson, the next morning. The atmosphere was carefree. No one sensed anything sinister, waiting just hours away. Around 1 a.m., tired after a long day, Susie and Stacy decided to leave. They had originally planned to spend the night at a friend's house, but it was too crowded. Susie suggested they go back to her home instead, a quiet neighborhood where her mother Cheryl would already be asleep. It was a practical, safe option. No one could have known that this ordinary decision would mark the beginning of one of Missouri's most haunting mysteries. At around 2 a.m., the 2 young women got into their cars and drove toward Susie's house. The drive took less than 15 minutes. The night was warm. The streets were silent. It was the kind of calm suburban scene that makes what happened next all the more terrifying. Evil didn't come from a dark alley or a remote cabin. It came to an ordinary house in a neighborhood where people felt safe. At approximately 2:15 a.m., neighbors recalled seeing the girls arrive. They parked their cars in front of the house on Del Mar Street, turned off the engines, and disappeared inside. The house was dark. Cheryl was likely asleep. That was the last time anyone ever saw them alive. The hours after Susie and Stacy returned home are a complete mystery. No one knows what truly happened between the moment the 2 girls stepped to the front door and the following morning. What we do know is this. By the time the sun rose over Springfield on June 7, 1992, 3 women, Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall, had vanished without leaving a single clear trace behind. It all began when Stacy's family started to worry. She was supposed to meet friends early that morning to head to the water park in Branson, but she never showed up. At first, her mother, Janice, thought her daughter had overslept after the long night of celebrations. She called the house on Del Mar Street repeatedly. No one answered. After a while, Janice decided to drive over. She expected to find the girls sleeping late, or maybe getting ready slowly. Instead, she arrived to find something that didn't make sense. All three cars, Cheryl's, Susie's, and Stacy's, were parked outside the house. Inside, the women's purses, keys, cigarettes, and personal belongings were still there. The family dog was inside, unharmed but noticeably agitated. The television was on, silently playing static, the kind of white noise that fills a room late at night when the broadcast ends. And the front door wasn't locked. Even stranger was a broken porch light right by the front entrance. Someone had shattered the bulb, leaving the doorway in darkness. At first, nobody thought much of it. But later, investigators would consider the possibility that this was deliberate, a way to hide movement at the entrance and approach the house unseen. Janice knocked and called their names. No one answered. She entered cautiously, expecting at any moment to find the women asleep or coming downstairs. But the house was silent. As more friends and relatives began to arrive, the house slowly filled with people searching, calling, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. At least 10 different individuals entered the home that morning, moving through rooms, touching surfaces, even cleaning up the broken glass from the porch light to avoid injuries. In doing so, they unknowingly destroyed potential evidence forever. At some point, Janice noticed that the answer machine had 2 new messages. The content of those messages was described as strange and disturbing, but they were accidentally erased before police could listen to them. Later, investigators speculated that the calls could have been obscene prank calls, which were fairly common at the time, but others believed they could have been from the perpetrator, calling to check whether police had arrived, or simply torment. By midday, it was clear that something was very wrong. Janice reported all 3 women missing to the Springfield Police Department. What followed would become one of the most criticized parts of this case, the handling of the initial investigation. Police arrived at the scene but treated it as a routine missing persons case, not a potential abduction. There were no obvious signs of break-in or struggle, no blood, no overturned furniture. No screams had been heard during the night. To them, it looked like 3 adults who might have left voluntarily. But to the families, it was unthinkable. Meanwhile, every hour that passed meant more contamination of the scene. Dozens of footprints had already been left throughout the house. Objects had been moved. What might have been a critical crime scene was now a confused, trampled environment. Later, experienced investigators would say that if the house had been sealed off the moment the family arrived, if the scene had been protected, if those phone messages had been preserved, this case might have been solved within days. But in 1992, small city police departments weren't equipped for large-scale missing persons investigations, especially involving 3 adults at once. Springfield police had no idea they were standing at the center of a mystery that would haunt the nation for decades. Outside, the day grew hot and bright, a sharp contrast to the unsettling emptiness inside the Levitt home. The 3 cars remained parked, silent witnesses to something that had happened in the dead of night. Whatever had occurred had left no obvious traces. And somewhere, somehow, 3 women were gone. By evening, news of the disappearance had begun to spread through the city. Friends and relatives started calling each other. Television stations picked up the story. What had begun as confusion was quickly turning into fear. Springfield wasn't prepared for a mystery like this. People locked their doors for the first time in years. Rumors spread. Some said they saw unfamiliar vehicles in the neighborhood that night. Others claimed to have heard strange noises. But there were no confirmed sightings, no clear leads, no ransom notes, and no suspects. In less than 24 hours, a simple, ordinary house in a quiet Missouri neighborhood had transformed into the center of one of America's most baffling true crime stories. The days following the disappearance of Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall were filled with confusion, frustration, and mounting fear. Springfield police launched an official investigation, but almost immediately, they were faced with a case that defied logic. There were no signs of forced entry, no physical evidence of violence, no ransom demands, and no credible witnesses. It was as if 3 women had simply vanished into thin air. Detectives began by retracing the women's final known movements. They interviewed friends who had been at the graduation parties that night, hoping to find someone who had seen or heard anything unusual. But every lead led nowhere. Everyone remembered the girls laughing, celebrating, and talking about plans for the next morning. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The police also canvassed the neighborhood around Del Mar Street. They went door to door, asking if anyone had noticed suspicious activity during the night. A few neighbors recalled hearing dogs barking or cars passing by, but nothing stood out as alarming. One man reported seeing a dark-colored van parked near the house sometime around 3:30 a.m. That van quickly became the focal point of one of the earliest theories in the case. Police issued a bulletin asking anyone who had seen a similar vehicle to come forward. For weeks, tips about vans flooded the station. Dark vans, white vans, rusted vans, vans with ladders, vans with tinted windows. But none of these leads resulted in anything concrete. The mysterious van remained just that, a mystery. Inside the house, investigators searched for forensic evidence. But by the time the crime scene unit arrived, it had already been contaminated by friends and family members earlier that morning. Fingerprints, footprints, and fibers had been disturbed or destroyed. The broken porch light, the unlocked door, and the eerie phone messages were the only tangible clues they had, and none of them led anywhere. Then came the suspects. The first and most well-known suspect was Robert Craig Cox. Cox was a former Army Ranger with a violent criminal history, including an attack on a woman in Florida. At the time of the disappearance, he was living in Springfield. Police brought him in for questioning. Cox maintained that he was at home with his girlfriend the night the women vanished. His girlfriend initially backed up his story, but later, she recanted her statement. Despite the suspicious change, there was no physical evidence linking Cox to the case, and police were forced to release him. Years later, in a chilling interview with a local journalist, Cox implied that he knew exactly what had happened to the three women. "They're dead," he said calmly, "and you'll never find them." When asked why he would say something like that, he simply replied, "I know that they're dead. I just know." He refused to elaborate. Detectives continued to monitor Cox for years. He was considered a person of interest, but never formally charged. There were other suspects. Two, a series of convicted felons in the area were questioned, including burglars and sexual offenders. Some had alibis, others didn't. One man bragged in jail that he had been involved in disposing of the bodies, but his story constantly changed and was eventually dismissed as attention-seeking. Another theory pointed to someone who may have followed the girls home from a graduation party. The night had been long. The girls were tired, and their decision to switch plans at the last minute may have been overheard by someone with ill intentions. The broken light bulb and unlocked door suggested the possibility of a planned abduction. Someone could have been waiting in the shadows near the house, taking advantage of the darkness. Investigators also examined the possibility that more than one person was involved, abducting and controlling 3 adult women simultaneously, without a single neighbor hearing anything, would be extremely difficult for one person acting alone. A team of 2 or more offenders could explain the speed and precision with which the crime seemed to occur. In the absence of hard evidence, the case attracted rumors and conspiracy theories. Some people believed that the women had stumbled upon a burglary in progress and were silenced to eliminate witnesses. Others whispered about a cover-up involving someone powerful in the community, though no proof ever surfaced. Still others speculated about serial killers passing through Missouri in the early 1990s, linking the case to unrelated murders across state lines. Forensic technology at the time was limited. DNA testing was still in its early stages, and the contaminated crime scene made meaningful analysis nearly impossible. Detectives followed hundreds of tips, mapped out timelines, consulted profilers, and even worked with psychics. But the investigation constantly hit dead ends. The Springfield Police Department formed a task force dedicated exclusively to the case. Dozens of detectives worked around the clock, fielding leads from all over the country. Billboards went up with the women's faces. National news outlets picked up the story. America was captivated by the chilling simplicity of the case. 3 women, 1 house, no evidence, no suspects, no answers. But despite the nationwide attention, the investigation produced no breakthrough. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And eventually, The case of the Springfield Three grew cold. For the families, though, it never went cold. They continued to pressure law enforcement, organize searches, distribute flyers, and speak to media. They refused to let the women be forgotten. Every holiday, every birthday, every anniversary that night was a painful reminder that there were still no answers. As the 1990s turned into the 2000s, hope of finding Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, and Stacy McCall alive began to fade. But the mystery never disappeared. The case of the Springfield Three continued to cast a long shadow over the city and over everyone who had been touched by it. In the late 1990s, the Springfield Police Department periodically revisited the case, reviewing old evidence with fresh eyes and newer technology. But progress was slow. The contamination of the crime scene back in 1992 had left investigators with almost nothing usable. The white noise on the TV, the broken porch light, the erased answer machine messages, none of it had provided any real breakthroughs. Then in 2002, a bizarre and widely publicized tip reignited public attention. A local man claimed that the bodies of 3 women were buried beneath the parking garage of a hospital in Springfield. He said he had received this information from a psychic. At first, police dismissed it, but the story spread rapidly through media, and public pressure mounted for them to investigate. The tipster claimed that radar scans could reveal anomalies beneath the concrete. Private individuals eventually paid for a ground-penetrating radar test. The scans that appear to show 3 irregular shapes under the concrete. For a moment, it seemed like the mystery might finally be solved. But the hospital refused to allow excavation, citing the cost and disruption it would cause. The police said they didn't have enough probable cause to obtain a warrant. And so, despite the public's growing obsession with the parking garage theory, nothing was ever dug up. The site remains untouched to this day. Throughout the 2000s and 2010s, police received hundreds of new tips. Some came from people who claimed to have overheard confessions. Others came from supposed witnesses who remembered strange details years after the fact. But none of these leads led to any arrests. DNA technology improved dramatically during this period, and old evidence was tested multiple times. But with the original scene compromised, there was little to work with. No fingerprints, no usable DNA, no murder weapon, no bodies. It was a perfect mystery, and a perfect nightmare for investigators. The case became a fixture in American true crime culture. Documentaries were made. Podcasts dissected every timeline, every theory, every suspect. Local newspapers ran anniversary articles every June. Television programs featured interviews with surviving family members, detectives, and armchair sleuths who refused to let the mystery die. For Springfield, the case changed everything. People who had once felt comfortable leaving their doors unlocked began double-checking their locks every night. Teenagers who had grown up in the years after the disappearance knew the story by heart. The house on Delmar Street became a grim landmark, a reminder of how quickly ordinary life could be shattered. The families of Cheryl, Susie, and Stacy never gave up. They continued to search, to hope, to push. Janice McCall, Stacy's mother, became one of the most vocal advocates for keeping the case in the public eye. She attended countless interviews, press conferences, and community events, repeating the same message year after year. Someone out there knows something, and we will never stop looking. Time, however, is merciless. As the decades passed, many of the original investigators retired. Some family members grew old. Some passed away without answers. The house on Delmar Street changed owners. New families moved in, but the mystery lingered like an invisible presence that refused to leave. Every so often, a new lead would briefly bring hope. A reported sighting, a deathbed confession, a piece of evidence retested with modern technology. Each time, hopes rose. Each time, they were dashed. And yet, the case has never officially closed. The Springfield Police Department still considers it an active investigation. Files remain on desks. Photos hang on the walls of the cold case unit. 3 faces, 3 names, 1 unanswered question. What happened on that warm June night in 1992? Where did 3 women go in the space of a few silent hours? Who was responsible? And how has that secret remained hidden for more than 3 decades? Perhaps someday a new technology will uncover what was missed. Perhaps someone's conscience will finally crack. Perhaps the ground beneath that parking garage really does hold the answers. Or perhaps the truth has already been buried so deeply, physically or metaphorically, that it may never surface. What remains today is a story that still chills anyone who hears it, not because of blood or violence, but because of the silence. The eerie, unbroken silence left behind by three vanished lives. Cheryl Levitt, Susie Streeter, Stacy McCall, three women who walked into the night and were never seen again.